Have you ever felt love slipping away through silence and miles? What if distance isn't the end, but the lesson, teaching your heart how to stay, how to trust, and how to love beyond touch? The silence between two hearts. It was a quiet morning in Copenhagen, the kind of morning where the air feels too calm, almost heavy. She sat by the window, watching the gray light spread over the rooftops, holding her coffee the way people hold something they don't want to lose. Across the city, he was packing his suitcase for a flight that would change everything, a job abroad, a dream, a promise. Yet, in that silence before goodbye, both felt something they couldn't say out loud, that love, no matter how strong, trembles when faced with distance. You know that silence, don't you? The one that sits between words you want to say but can't. The one that stretches between, I love you, and, I'll miss you. It's the kind of silence that doesn't make noise. It hums inside your chest. And when love meets silence, your heart starts whispering things your mind doesn't want to hear. Will we still feel the same? Will we survive this? For many people learning English, or love, silence feels like failure. You think if you can't say it, it's gone. But silence can be a language too. It can say, I care, I'm scared, or, I hope you're still there. The trick is learning to listen to what's not said. Just like learning English, love requires patience with the pauses, the mistakes, and the quiet spaces where meaning hides. That morning, as his train left the station, she didn't wave. Not because she didn't love him, but because she didn't trust her own voice not to break. And he didn't look back, not because he didn't care, but because looking back hurts more than leaving. Between them, the silence spoke louder than words ever could. Some bridges aren't built with wood or steel. They're built with waiting, with remembering, with every breath you take when you want to speak but choose to trust instead. Letters across the sea. Weeks passed. Copenhagen's air grew colder, and so did her apartment. Every night, she opened her laptop and stared at the blinking cursor, that tiny, impatient light, before typing, Hi, how was your day? It was strange how 7 words could carry so much weight, how something so small could feel like crossing an entire ocean. That he replied from a country she had never been to, full of neon signs, long nights, and strange food he couldn't pronounce. His messages were always short. Not because he didn't care, but because life had swallowed him whole. Work, deadlines, new faces, new streets, everything was loud and fast. And between those fast moments, he missed the quiet rhythm of her voice saying, Take care. Love and distance is like writing letters in the rain. The ink fades, but you keep writing anyway. You don't stop because the words matter. You keep going because they remind you who you're writing for. Every good morning and sweet dreams becomes a fragile thread that tries to hold two worlds together. For anyone learning English, or learning love, this part is the hardest, when communication feels like translation. You want to say exactly what's in your heart, but you don't have the words. So you say less. You hope the other person will read between the lines, will understand that, I'm fine actually means, I miss you. But sometimes, they don't. And that's where the pain begins, in the space between what you meant and what they heard. Still, she kept writing. Every night. Every letter started with hope and ended with patience. Because sometimes love is not about grand gestures. It's about staying, even when all you have left are words that cross the sea. One day, she received a message from him that simply said, "Your letters make this place feel less foreign." It wasn't poetry. But to her, it was enough. Because love, in its simplest form, is just two people reminding each other that they still exist. The everyday loneliness. Every morning in Copenhagen began the same way. She would open the curtains, watch the light stretch slowly across the quiet street, and whisper to herself, "Another day." There was nothing special about it. The same bike leaning by the door, the same barista at the cafe, the same seat by the window. But somehow, everything felt different when he wasn't there. Loneliness, she realized, doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it hums softly through the routine, like background music you can't turn off. You pour your coffee, check your phone, and scroll through pictures you've already seen 100 times. The city outside keeps moving, but inside, time slows down. She started noticing small details she used to ignore. The sound of the tram at 7:30. The old man who fed pigeons in the park. The smell of cinnamon bread from the bakery across the street. Each detail became her company, her quiet reminder that life was still happening, even when her heart was somewhere else. That if you've ever learned a new language, you know this feeling. You sit in a cafe, listening to people talk, catching one or two words you understand, but missing the rest. You smile anyway, pretending to belong. That's what loneliness feels like, understanding parts of life, but never the whole. Some nights, she practiced her English while talking to herself. Not because she needed it for work, but because it made her feel closer to him. "How was your day?" she whispered. "Did you eat?" And though no one answered, the sound of her own voice filled the emptiness for a little while. There's a strange beauty in loneliness. It teaches you to see, to listen, to feel. It makes every small thing meaningful again. And maybe that's how love survives distance, not by fighting the loneliness, but by learning to live inside it. That night, as she looked at the bridge lights reflecting on the canal, she smiled. Not because she stopped missing him, but because she finally understood. Missing someone is just another way of loving them. The language of waiting. Waiting became her new language. Not English. Not Danish. Just waiting. A quiet, invisible dialect spoken in the space between one message and the next. You see, waiting changes how time feels. Minutes stretch like hours, and a simple scene on the screen feels like a thunderstorm inside your chest. Every evening, she sat by the window with her tea, the same cup, the same spot, watching her phone light up. One notification could turn her whole mood around. But when it stayed silent, she started building little stories in her head. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he was tired, maybe he forgot. The human mind is wild like that. It fills silence with imagination. Waiting is a strange teacher. It tests your patience, exposes your fears, and reveals how much faith you truly have, not just in the other person, but in love itself. The truth is, distance doesn't destroy love, impatience does. And in those moments of waiting, she learns something profound. Love is not proven by constant presence, but by consistent faith. You can compare it to learning English. Remember those times when you practiced, but felt like your progress was invisible? You waited for fluency to come, but it didn't, at least, not right away. Still, you kept going. You trusted that one day, your words would flow more easily. That's how love works too. Every day you wait with kindness instead of frustration, your heart becomes a little stronger, a little wiser. Sometimes he called, his voice soft and tired. The connection would break, the sound would freeze, and they'd laugh at the glitch, because even in imperfection, there was comfort. Those short calls weren't long enough to fill the distance, but they reminded her that love could still travel through bad Wi-Fi and broken words. The language of waiting is universal. It has no grammar, no dictionary, just quiet hope. And when spoken with patience, it can turn the longest distance into the shortest bridge. When words are not enough. One evening, she realized something quietly heartbreaking. Words had started to lose their power. "I miss you" felt too small, too soft, too tired. She had said it so many times that it no longer carried the weight it once did. Love, it seemed, was growing in a place beyond language. Somewhere silence had taken root that he felt it too. Their calls were filled with pauses, not awkward, just full. Full of everything they couldn't say. Sometimes, he'd stare at her face on the screen, pixelated and flickering, and think, she's there, but not really here. And she would smile, pretending not to notice how tired his eyes looked. That's the thing about love at a distance. You both start acting brave so the other won't worry, but silence isn't always empty. Sometimes, silence says what words can't. When you love someone across oceans, "I miss you" becomes a heartbeat, not a sentence. Every unread message, every unfinished thought becomes a quiet proof that you still care. Have you ever noticed how language fails when emotion grows too deep? You try to describe the sky at sunset, or the feeling of hearing your favorite voice after weeks apart, and no word feels right. That's because words are only tools. Love is the space where they stop working. It's the same with learning English. At first, you focus on grammar, on correctness, on being understood. But one day, you realize that meaning doesn't live in words alone. It lives in tone, in pauses, in the way your heart moves while you speak. Fluency isn't about saying everything perfectly. It's about being brave enough to speak honestly, even when the words fall short. That night, she didn't text him back. Not because she didn't care, but because for once, silence said it all. And somewhere far away, he understood, not with his ears, but with his heart, because sometimes, love's loudest sound is no sound at all. The bridge rebuilt. Spring came quietly to Copenhagen. The snow melted, revealing the soft green beneath, and with it came a sense of renewal, like the world itself was whispering, "Try again." One morning, she walked across the old bridge that connected her neighborhood to the city center. It was the same bridge they used to cross together, laughing about silly things. Now, she crossed it alone. But something felt different this time, lighter. She stopped halfway, leaned against the railing, and looked at her reflection in the water. Maybe love isn't about holding on so tightly, she thought. Maybe it's about building again, even after you fall apart. That's the moment she decided to rebuild, not the relationship, but the bridge within herself. The one that had cracked under fear, distance, and doubt. Rebuilding love across distance isn't dramatic. It doesn't start with fireworks or long speeches. It starts with small acts, sending a message without expecting one back, listening more carefully, forgiving faster. Bit by bit, they began to talk again, slower, softer, but more real. Instead of, "Why didn't you call?" she asked, "How are you really?" Instead of long silence, he began saying, "I missed this." And slowly, the bridge between them reappeared, not out of routine, but out of understanding that it's funny how love and language follow the same pattern. When you forget English words, you rebuild them through context, memory, and courage. You don't give up, you find another way to say what you mean. And the more you practice, the stronger your bridge becomes. Science even says that rebuilding trust, whether in language or love, rewires your brain. Each act of kindness, each honest word releases oxytocin, the connection hormone. It literally rebuilds the bridge in your mind. So every time they laughed again, every time they forgave, their brains were learning to cross that bridge faster. By summer, they no longer feared the silence. They had turned it into music, because love, when rebuilt with patience, doesn't look like what it was before. It looks better, stronger, and far more real. Love in translation. When they finally saw each other again, it was almost unreal. Copenhagen looked brighter that day, the kind of light that makes everything seem like a memory before it even happens. He stood by the arrival's gate, holding a single tulip, the flower she used to tuck behind her ear. She walked toward him slowly, half smiling, half afraid. How do you greet someone you've loved through screens, through silence, through time? The first thing she noticed wasn't his face. It was his hesitation. The small, shy pause before he spoke. "Hi," he said, almost like a question. She laughed softly. "Hi," she answered, and somehow that simple word carried months of waiting, missing, forgiving. As they walked through the city, everything felt both familiar and new. They spoke slowly, choosing words carefully, like translators decoding an old language. Every sentence was an act of courage, not because they forgot how to talk, but because they wanted to say things right this time. Love, she realized, is always a translation. Between hearts, between languages, between what we mean and what we dare to say. And sometimes, translation makes the message clearer. Because when you truly care, you listen harder. You don't rush. You repeat until you're understood. It's the same with learning English, or any language. At first, you think translation is a weakness, but it's actually a bridge. It helps you understand not just words, but feelings, tone, silence. When you translate love, you don't just carry meaning, you carry empathy. That afternoon, they sat by the Nyhavn Canal, sharing ice cream, speaking half in Danish, half in English. The grammar was messy, but the meaning was perfect. He said, "You feel closer now," and she smiled, replying, "Maybe we finally speak the same language." In that moment, love didn't need to be poetic. It just needed to be real. And for the first time, both of them understood, love isn't lost in translation. It's found there. The lesson of distance. That evening, they stood again on the bridge, the same place where the story began. The air was still, the city lights reflected on the water, and for a moment, everything felt beautifully quiet. She looked at him and said softly, "Do you think the distance changed us?" He smiled, not rushing to answer, then said, "No. It just showed us who we already were." Distance, she realized, doesn't destroy love, it reveals it. When you're far apart, you learn what truly matters, not constant messages or perfect timing, but kindness, understanding, and patience. You stop chasing intensity, and start valuing consistency. You stop needing proof, and start trusting presence, even when it's invisible. In a way, distance is like learning a new language. At first, everything feels uncertain, the pauses, the misunderstandings, the frustration. But if you keep practicing with heart, one day you wake up and realize you're fluent, not just in words, but in connection. Many people give up on English, on love, because they mistake difficulty for failure. But the truth is, growth always hides inside struggle. You don't get stronger by avoiding distance, you grow by walking through it. You don't master language by fearing mistakes, you learn by speaking anyway, and maybe that's the quiet miracle of distance. It transforms love from something fragile into something fluent. It teaches you that real love isn't about holding tight, it's about understanding deeply. As the night wind brushed her hair, she leaned against him and whispered, "We didn't lose anything, did we?" He shook his head. "No," he said, "we built something new." They stood there in silence, watching the bridge glow beneath them, not as a reminder of what they survived, but of what they became. Two hearts, once apart, now fluent in the language of love and distance.